with all due respect.
Hey, we're Josh Ortegon and Greg Gaines, and this is With All Due Respect, the show where we keep it real about health, fitness, and performance. From weight loss to sports development, we're covering the conversations that matter.
Follow us on Instagram at Phenom Fitness, PHNM Fitness, and visit www.phenomfit.com to check out our training programs, coaching, and gear built for real results. Let's get into it.
All right, well, my screen says that we are recording. Whether or not that is true, I don't know. It's all new for me. But today, with all due respect, 88, 89, somewhere along there, we are continuing our series around fertility, pregnancy. I'm going to say the same bad joke I told everybody. All this means is Gray wants a baby. Is that means? Gray wants a baby.
It's okay. It's actually so funny that you say that because I've started tracking my cycle via an app, and it highly recommends buying some ovulation test strips just to make sure like where you are in your cycle. And I just bought ovulation test strips at Walmart, and I like texted my girlfriends and I was like, this does not mean I want a baby right this second. I'm just trying to figure out where I'm at. But anyways, yes.
Yeah.
So funny.
So when Gray's pregnant, we will go back to this video and we will talk about all the things that she can do exercise-wise, nutrition-wise, workout-wise when you're pregnant. And we have Margie Davenport. Margie, can you introduce yourself to our audience? I have found that I don't introduce people because I never do as good as a job as they do. Right.
Of course. Sure. So I'm a professor in the Faculty of Kinesiology, Sport and Recreation at the University of Alberta. So in very chilly Edmonton, Canada right now. So I've worked in the field of exercise, pregnancy, and postpartum for about the last 20 years. I'm by training an exercise physiologist, and a lot of the work that I've been doing over the last, especially the last 5 years, is trying to understand a bit more about the extremes of exercise in pregnancy, whether we're talking about people who are traditionally not or told that they can't exercise in pregnancy. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, athletes who are really keen to continue or sort of push the boundaries of what we know currently about exercise in pregnancy and postpartum.
You know, we talked about it a little bit before we recorded. I've heard women, men say 1,000 things around working out when you're pregnant.
Mm.
And I never know if any of them are true. I'm a cynic by nature, right? If you tell me it's raining, I'm going to walk outside.
That's great.
Right. I'm just natural. But we have worked with women that are pregnant, and everything is around, well, can you go to your doctor first? Like we have to do that, right? I've had and we've all jumped online and saw videos of the 8-month-old woman doing CrossFit. And she's going ham. I mean, she's kipping pull-ups, thrusters, squatting, right? And then we've seen the ones of the pregnant woman rolling wrong on an exercise ball, doing the stretching and talking about that. And I imagine for a brand new pregnant person who's wants to stay active or get active or is pregnant, they don't know where to, like, man, it's almost, they don't know where to go. Based on your research, and you've worked with a lot, I love the fact that you've worked with a lot of athletes. I think that's so cool that an athlete gets pregnant and they come to you and they're like, I'm on a national team and I'm pregnant, right? Like that's a real thing. What are some immediate misconceptions around pregnancy and exercise that you combat the most? And that's a loaded question.
I don't think we have that amount of time to
Yeah,
really
yeah, I was gonna
talk
say.
about
Yeah. I was like, "I'll just hit mute for the next
it.
hour and you can
Yeah.
go."
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of misconceptions about what you can and cannot do when you're pregnant. So probably the biggest one we hear about the most would be that you're not supposed to go above 140 beats per minute when you are pregnant. So that stems back from the 1985 guideline. It was the very first one that came out for pregnant women by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. It was groundbreaking at the time. We were moving away from this idea that nobody should be active during their pregnancy to everybody can be more active. But because they had such limited information, they put in place this limit of 140 beats per minute. Just a couple of years later, they actually reversed that recommendation and they took away all maximal heart rate zones. But when we're talking about, 40 years later, essentially, we still hear about this. I hear about it weekly. I'll have athletes who do send me a message on Instagram and they're like, I just went out for like a 2-hour bike ride. My heart rate was sitting at 160 beats per minute. I went to see my doctor and they said, don't go over 140. Like, what harm have I done? And so, that's probably the biggest one. It's also the one that has a lot of evidence suggesting now that we can go well past 140 beats per minute. We're not entirely sure of what the upper limit is yet, but more intense activity is certainly quite safe and also quite beneficial.
I think it's hard because maybe prior research or what our gynecologists and our OBs have told us, how do we form these ideas around what is truly safe for us? And, I think there's probably two different types of people, one that's maybe
Mhm.
been physically active for a very long time versus somebody who hasn't been. But I find it very challenging, even as someone who works in the space, to give somebody sound advice on what they're comfortable with, right?
Mhm.
I feel like it always kind of falls back on, well, don't stress yourself out over what you're trying to do because if you leave here stressed out, like that's not what we want. So
Absolutely.
what are you finding now that would maybe go against that advice? I know you said that, we
Mhm.
are finding we can totally go above that 160. We don't know where it might be, but what are we finding is like safe practice for people trying to exercise?
Mhm. So before we talk exactly about that, I'm going to give a bit of a history about why we're sort of at the place that we are right now. So before 2019, so I led the development of the 2019 Canadian guideline for physical activity throughout pregnancy. We had a lot of questions, not just about what is your maximal heart rate that you can do, but also, is it going to harm the baby if you are active, especially if you weren't active before? So we did a 3-year process where we surveyed all available literature. We put it all together and we were able to identify that physical activity and exercise during pregnancy is associated with about a 40% reduction in major pregnancy complications such as gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, gestational hypertension. But importantly, some of the key reasons why we hear that women are nervous or fear being active in pregnancy is because of these long held myths that it's going to harm the baby. So we looked at that information specifically and we found that there was no increased risk of having a miscarriage, having an early baby, or having a small baby. So this is really essential information to help sort of alleviate key concerns and fears that many women have. So based on the 2019 guideline, we can very conclusively say that within the realm or scope of that guideline, that we have really strong evidence that it's not only safe, it's actually really quite beneficial. Now, going back to your question about, can we do something more intense, especially for people who have been quite active before? There's good data within the guidelines that we're looking at that more intense activities up to about 80% of maximal effort is quite safe and beneficial as well. But there's certainly a subpopulation of pregnant women who want to push past that. So HIT training is a really great example. We're seeing more and more women before they become pregnant doing HIT training or CrossFit. And so many of them want to continue that while they're pregnant, but up until very recently, we had no information about it. So a couple of years ago, actually in the middle of COVID, oddly enough, we ran a study where we had women come in. And the goal was to get them doing HIIT exercise where they did 1 minute on, 1 minute off. And the goal was to get them above 90% of maximal effort in terms of their heart rate. And what we found is that they achieved, on average, 96% of maximal heart rate. And we measured the fetal heart rate response and then the blood flow to the baby as well. And in these activities, in women who were well pre-screened, they didn't have contraindications or medical reasons why they shouldn't exercise, that the activity was very well tolerated by the baby. So that was a first in human study, first one that we've ever looked at. We've since done similar studies looking at high load, intensity resistance training as well, and we see something very similar. So we know that there's probably an upper limit, just like everybody else in the world, that we can well and safely tolerate. We haven't been able to identify what that limit is during pregnancy yet, but we just sort of do this progressive increase in the intensity of our studies overall until we can start to really assess that.
Is it hard to find people to do these studies? Like, I feel like that would be kind of scary, right? Like, you're not just one person going into a study to test something on yourself, like you're testing something on the health of your child.
hmm So surprisingly, these are actually some of the easiest studies to recruit for. So, for example, when we were doing our COVID-based studies, we had pregnant women were considered to be quite high risk in COVID. And so we had huge protocols that were in place to ensure that they're safe from the virus. But I have never had a study happen so fast. And the reason is that these women are already doing it. They want to do it, but they want to know whether or not it is actually safe or beneficial for them to do that. And so some of those studies, they just zip right through because this is the information that these athletes really want to know.
Well, I would have never guessed that that would have been easy to recruit
It's
for.
really,
I feel like
I was pretty shocked myself, but
yeah.
we've seen it consistently with all of our studies that are sort of pushing the limits a little bit. Women who, right now we have a study looking at lifting more than 80% of their 1 rep max. And there's been pretty much no issues in getting people in there. We actually have to slow it down a little bit because
Mm,
we don't have enough capacity. So it's exciting.
Well, that is like one thing, you tell a lifter, Josh always says this because he's really into jujitsu. You tell us to
Cool.
stop, we're probably not going to, right? Like, we're going to
Yeah.
find a way to do it. So, somebody that's like, okay, I can do this safely with doctors around, researchers around, I'll
hmm
go for it.
Yes, and I should be really clear, when we do these studies, we have every and all possible safety protocols
yeah.
in place. People are safest in my hands doing those assessments. I have a clinical ultrasonographer right there measuring fetal responses after
Oh,
every single
wow.
set. Like, it's really intense. They're extremely expensive studies to run, but this is the information that we need to be able to support women who want to continue to do this type of study. This is not an off the cuff, just sort of like random things.
hmm
It's a pretty intense protocol for sure.
hmm How about what would your recommendations be? I know women who really weren't super active.
Mm.
Maybe they were cardio here and there, and maybe went for walks, and all of a sudden they're pregnant and they're like, I should really start exercising. To me, that kind of has kind of the light go off because I'm like, well, do you really want to add anything different? Because I don't know. Like, what would your conversation be with somebody who maybe they were slightly active?
Mhm.
All of a sudden, I'm not talking basic everyday activities. Maybe they get pregnant and then they're like, well, shoot, I'm a little bit overweight and like I'm pregnant and like I don't want to have a bad pregnancy. What would your suggestions be to that person?
Mhm. So, great question. It's actually what we typically hear in the research world is that a lot of guidelines will say that, or older guidelines will say that if you weren't active before, you shouldn't start something new in pregnancy. And so that was one of the key questions that we had with the 2019 guideline is we actually separated out our information from the studies that we were looking at to be able to identify if there was any difference in the change in pregnancy complications if you were somebody who was, continuing activity from before conception, or if you're new to exercise, so previously inactive. And we actually found that there were even greater benefits for people who had not been active before pregnancy and actually starting while they were pregnant. So it's sort of counterintuitive to this previously long held belief. Now, that is not saying that when you're pregnant and you're deciding that you're going to start activity that you just jump into, 30, 60-minute run, multiple times per week. You do have to start low and you go slow and you just gradually build your foundation, just like you would with any other client, right? And so building those foundations, a gradual increase is really important. One of the key things that we find is that if you jump into exercise while you're pregnant, especially if you're not feeling super well or you're not recovering well after a session or multiple sessions, many people will actually stop activity for the rest of their pregnancy. So it's important to find activities that are enjoyable and sustainable throughout pregnancy as much as possible. The other caveat to that is that when you're pregnant, there are definitely days that you're not going to feel well at all. You're just feeling really tired. And that is completely okay. You need to give yourself the grace that, taking care of your recovery is really, really important. Your mental health is really important, and return to it when you can. But always, something is definitely better than nothing.
My wife, we've had multiple people tell my wife we should have another child
Okay.
because the first pregnancy and the labor and our child has been really easy.
Mm,
So when we have
mm,
people come tell me, it's like, well, they're like, man, I haven't slept the first 6 months. I'm like, I think our kid slept through the night right away.
mm.
And like her pregnancy was like, she's like, not a big deal. And the labor was like, she's like, 7 pushes, there's a kid, we go home. Right. And, my biggest joke I tell people is, we have one really awesome dog. We decided to get two, and the jerk. And so my joke is like, I have one like pretty easy labor, pretty birth, the kid pretty easy, like very compliant, happy child. The next one, she'll probably give birth to like the devil's child, right? That's just how it works. It happened with my dogs. It's going to happen with my kid, right? But one thing that we tell people all the time is she was very active going into pregnancy,
Hmm.
very healthy body weight, very active. Um, got pregnant, didn't gain a ton of weight. Like she gained her normal weight, but like I've heard people be like, "Well, I'm bedridden the last 3 months because they just gained so much weight." And she stayed active as much as she could up until like the last 2 or 3 weeks. Because the last 2 or 3 weeks, she's just like, this can happen now. Like we're ready anytime. Let's go. Let's get this thing
Hmm.
on. Um, are there is there a connection between the difficulties in labor and being healthy, strong, and active? My guess would say yes. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's maybe it's me thinking short-sighted, or me saying, hey, I tend to think like the answer to everything is exercise, right? Because I'm in exercise, right? I tend to think people are like, I'm tired, work out more. They're like, I don't sleep, work out more. They're like, I'm kind of down today, work out more. Like,
Hmm.
I tend to like throw exercise as like this blanket answer. But can we correlate um exercise, lifting, and cardio to while my labor situation and my birth was easier than most people? Can that be connected?
So it's complicated.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
probably the
Thank you.
easiest way to put it. So when we talk about exercise and labor and delivery, labor is called labor for a reason. It is a pretty substantial, energetic period of your time. Like it's hard. And so certainly being active in your pregnancy is going to help to support and maintain your fitness. That being said, we also know that people are quite active, and especially athletes also have a higher pain tolerance. And so they might actually labor for longer if when they're delivering. And so it might actually extend labor, has been the hypothesis as well. Um, in terms of other considerations, so we're talking about weight. Weight is one of those things it's probably my least favorite discussion about research in exercise and pregnancy. I think there are more important things to think about, such as your mental health. We don't talk about it enough. Talking about preventing gestational diabetes and preeclampsia, those are really essential. But weight is a really easy indicator to be able to look at as a proxy for overall health as well. And so that we do know that there is a relationship between increased levels of physical activity and a reduction in the risk of having what we call excessive weight gain, or weight gain that is going above the recommended amount of weight to gain for your pre-pregnancy body mass index, or BMI. If you gain above the recommended amount, there is an increased risk of having a larger baby. So a larger baby, naturally, my kids are going to be a bit bigger because I'm actually quite tall. My husband is very tall as well. And so depending on what your body stature and size actually is, exercise may or may not influence that. But larger babies are a little bit harder to deliver and more likely to be delivered by cesarean section. So while we talk about exercise, it's an essential component. Is it going to guarantee a really easy delivery? Absolutely not. It might be easier to tolerate. You might have a phenomenal delivery like your wife did. But we also know on the opposite side of things that we do also see some athletes experiencing really delayed labor that they are able to tolerate so much better than somebody who was less active. So I think it's actually quite a complex relationship. So I really focus a lot on not just your physical health when you exercise in pregnancy, but your mental health as well.
That's kind of what inspired this whole series that we've been working on. Is I've
Hmm.
had friends that have experienced preeclampsia or
Hmm.
gestational diabetes. I've had someone close to me that had like almost a 48-hour labor, although she was
Mm,
very active.
yeah.
So I really wanted to get into like the nitty-gritty of these things and why are
Hmm.
these things happening? And I had a question on a previous episode, and I was like, maybe it wasn't as talked about when our parents were having children,
Hmm.
or is it just way more prevalent now that we're experiencing these things based on environmental factors or
Hmm.
exercise factors or any of those things? Do you have any advice or any piece of evidence related to
Hmm.
that?
In terms of the pregnancy complications that we're seeing, so
Yeah,
definitely we are seeing an increase in different pregnancy complications. Some of it is probably environmental, some of it is social. I think back, my mom was pregnant with me at 23, and I was pregnant with my first at 33. So
right.
we're seeing that moms are in general older than they were before, and I think that's fantastic. We have choices and we have opportunities that are essential. So we shouldn't be saying to everybody just to avoid preeclampsia, you want to get pregnant when you're
Yeah,
in your early
23.
20s. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Um, but certainly, we're also seeing that our activity levels are decreasing. The change in the food that is available to us is certainly changing as well. Talking about preeclampsia, I think that is one of the most powerful influences that we have of exercise. So before the 2019 guideline, when we did our systematic review, we actually didn't have any preventative therapy for reducing the risk of preeclampsia. So aspirin is available for women who are at high risk of developing preeclampsia. That was just sort of starting to come into clinical practice around the same time. But for the vast majority of people who are technically low risk, one of the key risk factors for developing preeclampsia is that you're a first time mom, especially if you're an older first time mom, like I was. And so what we found is that being physically active actually reduced the risk by 40%. And so that's now actually been incorporated into certainly the Canadian guidelines, but international guidelines as well, including the World Health Organization. That was a major finding and a major, preventative risk factor that exercise has a really important component and role to play.
Is that exercise in general, or is that
Mm.
specific, like, higher intensity? Is it weight training? Does walking count as that too?
Yeah, walking. So almost every study that we have is actually based on walking. So to be able to have a 25% reduction in the risk of having preeclampsia, we're talking about going for a 10-minute walk every single day, like minimal amounts of activity. So if you think about it, what we did is actually what we call a dose response curve, where seeing if you get greater reductions in the risk of that pregnancy outcome, if you had a greater increase in your volume of activity. And we did see a dose response with that preeclampsia plot, where as the volume of activity increased, you had a greater reduction in the risk of preeclampsia. Now, it's certainly not going to go to zero for anybody, but we had such limited information sort of at those longer durations, higher intensity activities. We had virtually no information about weightlifting in pregnancy at that particular point in time. So a lot of the work that we're doing now is trying to understand a bit more in those higher intensities, longer duration, and heavier weightlifting for sure.
So when you really will look at a big thing we always talk about on this podcast is minimum effective dose,
Mm,
right? What's
mhm,
the minimum effective dose to move the needle forward in anything, in any sort of,
mm,
whether it's better eating, exercise, anything? The way we avoid extremes and the way we help with sustainability is what's the minimum effective dose you can do on a bad day to move the
mhm.
needle forward, even if you're having a bad day? And it sounds like to me, based on the research, if somebody just walked by me and was like, "Hey, my wife's pregnant, what can she do every day?" 10-minute walk.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's wild. And you bump that up
Yeah.
to 15 minutes, you have a 25% reduction in the risk of gestational hypertension and gaining above the recommended weight guidelines for your BMI.
And I guess what we're doing, we're kind of seeing where that where the law of diminishing return hits, right? Like,
Yes,
oh, we do 15, it keeps better. What if we did 20? What if we added
exactly.
strength training? Where's it become the curve start to fall
Hmm.
and where it becomes actually not good for you? And I'm sure that's out there, right? It's that number
It will
that that number, you'll find it.
I hope
You'll
so
eventually
at
find it.
some
Yeah.
point, but we don't have the data at this point in time to say what the maximal dose actually is.
Yeah.
Right.
But to be able to say to somebody, "Hey, you can help gestational diabetes and preeclampsia with a 10-15 minute walk every day."
Yeah, it's extremely powerful.
Well,
Right.
that's just, I mean, I have a hard time thinking somebody who's going to go, "That's too much." You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
and
Like,
to your
that's,
mental health piece as well, like,
Mhm,
especially for somebody that is dealing with a very tough pregnancy,
mhm,
that may be bedridden or may be very sick, that's gonna allow them to be like, "Okay, I can actually leave the house. I can do something.
mhm,
Even if I can't leave the house and I can walk around my house, I can at least do something that's going to help this pregnancy be better, my labor and delivery be better."
mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
one of the point to touch on mental health. I probably had in the last year or two, maybe 3 women I've worked. And anytime a woman gets pregnant, I always offer the opportunity to work with Gray, right? I mean, Gray hasn't had children yet, she hasn't been pregnant yet, but there might be some things they want to talk to Gray about, and they
Mhm.
don't want to talk to me about. And I do not take any of that personal. When we have women that call in or contact me about coaching for nutrition and lifting and training, I said, "Hey, business partner's a female if you want. Like, it doesn't hurt my feelings. It doesn't hurt my feelings. Like, I'm not bothered by that at all. I want you to have a great experience." Um, but every woman I've worked with from a mental health perspective, and I'm talking early on, they
Mhm,
go, "I want to get this right because I don't want to lose the I'll just say what they say, I don't want to lose the body I had before pregnancy and worked so
mm,
hard for." They
mhm,
say that. They say, "I worked so hard. I worked my nutrition. I got in such good shape." Maybe they used to be overweight. They lost a lot of weight. They're in shape. They're moving. Life's happening. And all of a sudden, boom, they get pregnant. And the first thing they say, "I'm not going to be one of those women who like gains 50 pounds and can't lose it. And now the figure I've always wanted is gone. And my kid ruined it." Is basically what I kind of hear him saying, right?
mhm,
I think now that you're talking about it, every single woman said that to me.
mhm.
And That's a I can imagine that's a pretty stressful place. to put a female to
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, your fitness goals are over, and enable for you to ever be in shape and be healthy is your baby ruined it all. That's kind of
Mm-hmm.
what I heard him saying.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
When we first mentioned mental health, the first thing that came to my mind was they're already having anxiety for post-delivery.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I
And
would
they
even say
come to
that's a
me.
conception anxiety. Like, I have that anxiety. I don't want to lose progress that I've made, body that I have, It's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely an anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as people want to say, like, oh, that's short-sighted and a little bit narcissistic to think that way. Well, hey, turn on the TV, okay? Open a magazine. I'm one of the things I'm thankful about is having a boy sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
because the things that women are exposed to on the TV, on social media, the constant comparison, you see the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in my head I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, what's she talking about? But hearing you talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
now I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a thing. I guess I'm going to ask you to kind of touch on that. Obviously, there's a lot to that
Mm-hmm.
outside of just being in shape.
Mm-hmm.
There's, maybe your husband's a jerk. I'm saying, like, we can get down to that, right? But touch on how do you do any work around mental health and pregnancy and postpartum?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know, I mean, when my son started to get past the baby stage
Mm-hmm.
and didn't need to be attached to mommy,
Mm-hmm.
like, my wife really struggled with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's struggling with the fact that our 9-year-old had super long hair, and it was beautiful, curling, spirally blonde hair. 2 weeks ago, we cut it, and I think she's like in the bathroom crying.
Yeah.
She's like, he's not a boy anymore.
I know.
She's like, he look at it, it just makes his face look like a boy, and he's not my baby. And in the morning, she'd get up every morning, and he'd wake up, and she would sit in the bathroom, and he would sit on her. She'd call it morning hugs.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't want to do morning hugs anymore, bro. He's
Uh,
out. He doesn't want it anymore. I'm 9 years old, mom. He doesn't want to get walked to school when we drop him off day one. He's like, I can't. You got to drop me off a block down the street, mom. I'm walking. And as a dad, you're like, finally, he can start doing stuff on his own, dude. Like, oh my god, when he learned to make his lunch, I threw a party because I was just like, thank you for being able to do your lunch. But for my wife, it was
mm-hmm.
like, I can't snack. I can't put notes in his lunch.
I know.
Right. Right. Every woman that
She
talks
can
about that,
totally sneak it in still.
yes, she does. Trust me.
Mm.
But can you talk a little bit about the mental health side? Because there's not a woman that's not going to connect to that from, I don't want to lose my figure. What if I'm going to be a good mom? I still want to be in shape. Or it could be this. I'm not in really good shape, and I'm having a ton of stress about will it affect my baby
Mm-hmm.
during the pregnancy. I have a feeling this might be a good spot. Because you already said we don't talk about mental health enough.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear it. I want you to kind of speak on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum, we know there's strong evidence that this is a period of vulnerability for certainly mental health challenges, but also social challenges. The way that you move through life as somebody who is pregnant or postpartum or a mother is completely different than when you were who you were before you were pregnant. And that can be a real challenge for many of us. It can also be a period of empowerment as well. And so, we often hear about all the negative side effects and, how it's going to change your body and, being concerned about who you are and what you like, and what your identity is and how much that will change. There's no question, as soon as you're a mom, your life has changed, your identity will change, but I think it's also a period of growth and empowerment. And I don't want to be the same person I was before I had kids, and I had those fears before. I think that's just part of growing as an individual. That being said, when we talk about things like athletic identity and being concerned about how your body is actually changing, That's why it is so critical that we do this kind of research to be able to understand if it is actually safe or beneficial, or if it's actually harmful to do cross training during pregnancy or do high intensity exercise or weightlifting, because that gives people a little bit of themselves that. Currently, what we typically do with the guidelines is say, no, you actually can't lift heavy during your pregnancy. And we don't know about doubling current guidelines, and you can't go above 300 minutes per week. We have to change and understand that there is a balance between, the physical risks and the potential balance or benefits to both physical, but also your mental health. And so that's been one of the biggest changes I've started to see in this entire field is that we're reflecting that athletic identity, motherhood identity is also a really critical piece, and that if we take away somebody's major coping mechanism, a lot of us exercise to reduce stress, to feel better, to, certainly support our health, but I think oftentimes that's actually one of the bottom reasons. And that if we take that away from people, we're going to cause some harm for sure. When we talk about exercise in the postpartum period, we just released the 2025 Canadian guideline. When we talked to postpartum women, there were two critical things that they wanted to hear about. So we spent 6 months consulting to find out what information they wanted in the postpartum guideline. Number one was mental health. That entire guideline is based on supporting mental health. And the second one is sleep, which we can definitely talk about, but it's very exhausting. And so we did look at how exercise might actually support depression and anxiety. We saw that there was a 45% reduction in the risk of having depression during postpartum, and that if you start earlier than 12 weeks, that you can actually have even greater reductions. So that's really important messaging. Again, very minimal dose required to help get that improvement in your overall mental health. Again, we're talking about 10 to 12-minute walk per day, so very minimal. And that messaging is just not getting out there. The final piece that we heard from women who are postpartum is they wanted support. They didn't just want support from their partners. They wanted support from family, friends, and they really wanted support from society. So we've come, for whatever reason, to this place where, a lot of people are being told, oh, you're on maternity leave, like it's a vacation. Right. And that's probably the worst thing that you can say to somebody who's struggling with their mental health, has no idea how to take care of a baby, because we don't have that information being passed down in the same way we did many years ago. And so, yeah, I could talk about this for a very long time, but finding ways to support our women postpartum, giving the flexibility in terms of, if you're somebody who wants to get back to it right away, these are the steps that you need to take to be able to identify if you're ready or if you have a medical reason why you shouldn't. And you know what? If you're not ready until close to the 1 year mark to return to physical activity because baby's not sleeping, you're not getting support from your partner, and it's just not going to fit with where you're at in that particular point in your life, that is totally fine. But we have to get these supports in place because there is good evidence that 2/3 of moms actually stop being active simply because they are mothers. And we know that they don't return to activity later on in life as a result. So we have
That's
to be
right.
Wow.
flexible and we have to be supportive.
2/3.
Mm,
2/3. That's a big number.
it's huge. It's a massive problem, but we see it in society, right? And a lot of it is because we don't have the supports in place to be able to mobilize early in the postpartum period. A lot of us who have had C-sections, we end up in bed for 3 days. Well, that's the start of, poor mental health for sure. You get home, you just don't know what to do with the baby. You're afraid to leave the house is often what we hear. And so we end up having this culture where, you're afraid to do any level of activity, let alone, get outside and go for a walk, especially when it's -30 and icy outside, right? And it's a challenge to take baby to a mall to do mall walking, because you have to get them into this, little car, and then they're screaming because they're so hungry. But finding ways to mobilize and encourage and it's actually okay to just do a 5-minute walk around your house or do a couple of extra stairs as a starting point to a return to activity, and supporting their physical activity, especially in those early days, so important.
I can't help to think that you talk about the support system. You know, well, quickly, I was reaching out to somebody to come on our episode to talk about something to do with pregnancy, as Gray was doing this, and I reached out to who she worked for, and it was actually a female. She's like, "Oh, you can probably text her at any time. She's on maternity leave."
Hmm.
I know. Yeah, he's like, oh, you had a lot of comments to that. I have a feeling when he goes, yeah, just she's not working right now, but reach out to her anytime she's on maternity leave. And I'm like, I mean, she's not on the beach in like, she's not in the Bahamas, dude. She's not in St. Bart's like chilling. Like
Hmm.
she just gave birth to a kid. I don't feel comfortable texting her
Mhm.
at any time
Yes.
because she's
Yeah.
on maternity leave. I don't know what she's going through. How about when she comes back to work, we'll just reach back out,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Thank you for doing that.
I will just kind of show. Well, and and I think the person she's never had a baby. I've been around a brand new baby. I understand of the feeling of just like holding a baby in one hand, stabbing yourself in the eye on the other one, right? But I can't help but think when you talk about a support system. Um, when my wife really got back into exercise and fitness around, our child, my responsibility was when she wanted to go work out that I take over whatever has happened, right? And that
Mm,
it doesn't bother me because I'm super into training. I jujitsu and lifting. It's very important to me.
mhm,
Well, because it's important to me, and once she realized it's important to her, I supported it because I know me. Now there might be some dads that aren't like that. I know plenty of women
mhm,
who have said, "I work out all the time. My husband just doesn't care about fitness." Right? I also had a client one time. She actually stopped coaching with me. She's like, "I just don't have time to do this because I'm out of work at 5 o'clock. I have to take care of kids." She literally said this out loud. I almost wanted to like record it and play it back. She goes, "I'm out of work at 5. I have to take care of the kids, and my husband likes to have dinner on the table at 6:30." And I go, "Tell him to make his own damn food on 3 days a week, bro. I don't, you know what I'm
mhm,
saying? Like, tell him to feed the kids so you can exercise for 45 minutes.
mhm,
Like, what's he
Mhm.
doing?" That's what I want to know. It's like, what's he doing? Sitting on the couch watching the news while his wife's getting the kids together for the next day and making sure dinner's on, the table at 6:30. I mean, what if it
Mhm.
gets on the table at 7? Does he pull out the belt? Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, that doesn't work for like I'm almost felt bad for her. I'm like, she
mm,
Yeah.
felt like all these responsibilities she had with the kids, and I'm sure he might work out. And like it was actually a friend of mine's wife who does jujitsu. Like he can change his jujitsu schedule
Mhm.
so he can exercise. Whatever happened to like till death do it? Like, what are you talking about?
mhm.
I mean, what's he doing? Right?
Seeing quite or maybe an interesting tie, I guess. Do we know if there's a decrease in, like, childcare at fitness places? Because I know, like, classes are very
Mm,
popular now.
mhm.
I know with CrossFit, a lot of people can bring their kids. Josh, I
Yeah.
don't know about jujitsu if people bring their kids pretty commonly to sit and, like, hang out, but is there a decrease in gym childcare as to where a woman or a mom can't go and drop her kids in the childcare?
Mhm. So I don't know of any evidence on that specifically. What we have heard anecdotally is that a lot of gyms actually won't allow a pregnant woman to come in and train, period.
Wow.
I think it's that culture is certainly changing. I think one of the best things that has started to really occur are these, postpartum classes where you can actually bring your baby with them and you feel comfortable having your child sort of crawl around and, maybe scream or whatever else. But there's a lot more classes like that where we can actually incorporate and normalize having baby at a gym. And certainly there are, potential issues with safety. There's potential issues with liability. But I also think that if there's a will, there's going to be a way to make it work. And we are seeing lots of examples of this actually working as well.
That's encouraging, super
Mm,
encouraging.
mhm,
I do wanna ask you about maybe preconception or when you're thinking about starting a family.
mhm,
This is something that I'm seeing very commonly among friends, among clients, is that
mhm,
we're dealing with and ovulatory cycles because of the
Hmm.
intense
Mm.
exercise or maybe stress on the body. Can you touch a little bit on that? Maybe what a recommendation would be? Because I think what happens is you take a woman that, somebody like me or one of my friends, very high intense workout training, like we're in there 5 or 6 days a week. We really like our flow. And then a gynecologist might say, well, you need to stop doing all kinds of cardio.
Hmm.
What does that actually look like for making sure that your cycle is where it needs to be, you're having ovulation, and then you're also going to have, hopefully, a healthy pregnancy?
Hmm. So, probably the most important thing is that we talk about energy balance and energy availability. So, a couple of years ago, we have really started to increase the conversation about the importance of energy availability to be able to support your life and just being able to survive your reproductive function, but also to be able to support the training that you're doing. So there's actually studies from the late 90s by Ann Laux that looked at what is actually changing your reproductive function. So it's basically luteinizing hormone pulsatility. Is it the intense exercise itself, or is it the fact that you're not actually fueling yourself sufficiently to support reproductive function and the exercise? And it turns out that based on her work, and certainly there has been more data that supports it as well, that it's actually the not the intense exercise that is causing the issues with your reproduction. It's the fact that you're not actually fueling enough to be able to support both the reproduction and the exercise. And menstrual cycle is one of the first things that's going to actually go if you're not fueling sufficiently to be able to maintain your training. So when we talk about exercise and fertility, there's a lot of data all over the place. So when we talk about people who have not been active before, they might have a larger body size or a bit heavier BMI. If they start to exercise, we're actually seeing that exercise is very supportive of restarting ovulation. It's not always directly related to weight. There seems to be other mechanisms at play to be able to support that as well. There is some what we call cross-sectional data. So it's like data where you get information about people at sort of one time point and you report on whether or not they were able to get pregnant. And based on that data, we are seeing that the higher levels of activity that there seems to be an increased risk of having fertility issues. However, what we cannot tell from that is whether or not it's the exercise itself or if it's the fueling as well. And so, based on other sort of primary research that was done back again in the 1990s, we're quite certain or fairly sure that the reason for reduced fertility is strongly related to a fueling issue rather than an exercise issue. You can rectify that by reducing your activity levels as long as you maintain the food that you're eating as well. Or you can rectify that by maintaining your exercise levels and increasing how much that you're eating. But it's
Okay,
still a
that makes sense.
pretty nebulous area. We don't have a lot of information at this particular point in time, but I do have a master's student who's working on it right now. So I
It's a
So
love
it's
very
that area.
yeah,
I do too. I think it's very
Hmm.
interesting. And again, it's because it's what I'm experiencing right now in my life.
Absolutely.
I just hate that, there's always a demon, right? Like, so cardio
Hmm.
becomes the demon. We
Yeah.
don't talk about the nutrition piece of it. And that's what I'm
No.
experiencing a lot with, people around me. We obviously, Josh and I, we're nutrition coaches. So
Hmm.
my first thought is, yes, I want you to have exercise that supports you, but what are you eating? Where are we
Exactly.
finding our nutrients from? Are we getting proper quality food? Or are we just kind of eating junk food? Are we eating sporadically? Are we actually on a
Exactly.
schedule of routine? When it comes to, is there an exact deficit that you're finding or, a gap in food that you're finding that's really affecting ovulation or a menstrual cycle? Like what maybe is the percentage that we're seeing?
Hmm. So adequate energy availability would be 45 kcal per kilogram of fat-free mass, so muscle mass. As soon as you start to dip below that, I think the threshold where we typically see reduced menstruation or changes in our menstrual cycle is around 30, and then low energy availability itself would be around 20. So that is exceptionally low. I'm very happy to share that paper with you, but we do have some pretty good evidence now that low energy availability is going to cause a whole cascade of changes to hormonal regulation of your menstrual cycle. So fueling is critically important.
I
Mhm.
guess for me, what would be easier for me to do if I'm working with an athlete? Where am I going to get the most consistency or the most buy-in? Is it you need 500 calories more, or you need to cut a full day out of training,
Hmm.
right? Where, because you're telling me it's not, it's the energy balance is the issue, right? There's
Yeah.
really no upper limit of exercise if they're properly fueling, but there can definitely be a max amount of exercise based on what they're currently eating,
Hmm.
right? And I guess it's like, well, which one are they more likely to do? Are they more likely to eat 500 calories more?
Hmm.
Are they more likely to work out less? Right?
Hmm.
That's a tough one.
It is.
Your experience with athletes. Um, when you're working with young competitive athletes and maybe in their late teens, early 20s. Um, I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but you're a mother, so you're old enough to have some. You're old enough to kind of speak some wisdom into them, right? Can I say it that way? Like
That was very gentle. Thank you.
thank you. Well, I tell people I'm knocking on the door. I'm knocking on the door of 50,
Mm.
so I can, I have gray hairs of wisdom, and I talk to a lot of even other guys, or you talk to the 20-year-olds, and you're like, I remember that. I remember thinking that way. I remember
Hmm.
being that way. I probably thought about that way in my 30s, and they're 22, so I'm way behind the curve. When you speak to these women, it's all their sport, their sport, their sport, their sport. And
Hmm.
I've worked with Olympic level competitive athletes who always love their intensity training times. And especially the groups of girls. I remember working with a group of divers. They're all excited about high competition time because they're like, my period disappears. I'm so excited when it's gone. They're like, it's out. And I remember being like, yeah, they think that now because they're 22, right?
Hmm.
Do you, have you had some opportunities in what you do to just speak to women about like, hey, I know it might be cool that you think your period's gone, but there's going to become a time when you're like, I'd like to start a family, or I'd like to have something that maybe that's not as cool as you think.
Hmm. So we have done interviews with athletes talking about preconception and what information they wish that they had. And every single athlete says they wish that they had the education back when they were in their late teens and early 20s. They wanted to know about their periods and what a regular menstrual cycle means and what losing your menstrual cycle for 3 months or more actually means, and the potential implications, not just on your performance and your short term health, but also on your longer term health as well. And so, you know, if you know any teenagers or women in their early 20s, some of them are very open to hearing all about this and thinking about kids. That's great. But a large proportion are just not there. But getting the uncomfortable conversations in to their training and education is really essential. So I teach one course a year. It's physical activity, nutrition, and metabolism. Yesterday, we were talking about low energy availability, and I swear I spent like half the time making them all cringe, talking about periods and the importance that, understanding that your menstrual cycle is actually a barometer of your health. If you don't have a menstrual cycle,
Yeah.
there is something that is not going quite right. Having your menstrual cycle timing actually extend, that is a warning sign that something is not quite right. And it could be something as simple as, you don't realize you have PCOS. And it could also be that you're not fueling enough to support your training. And so something has to change in there. And so I think awareness is the most important thing, because the really heartbreaking piece about doing these interviews is many of them just weren't able to get pregnant,
Mm.
or they had to go through multiple rounds of fertility treatments to be able to start a family. if they had known, if they had been told this, they could have done something or at least made an informed choice rather than later on being presented with, I'm sorry, but you have to do IVF to be able to get pregnant because you're 37 and you've just found like the love of your life and you want to start a family. So the education is so important. The work that I do with FIPA and WTA is actually centered around education to make sure that these athletes are aware and know before they have to make these tough choices.
Any of those
That's
conversations around birth control?
Yeah. Oh, birth control is always a big part of it. So, one of the ways that younger girls are, or not younger girls, but like our sort of athletes are going to help work around their menstrual cycle is by taking birth control, especially, skip the placebo pills. But I think the education that being on the pill for, 10, 15 years is not necessarily the best thing for your health. It is actually, masking what is happening with your body. You may not know that you're missing your period for 3 months at a time because you are, sort of making it go away purposely.
Yeah, I've
It's
worked
a
with a group
tough.
of athletes that I've heard. When you work with female athletes and you're a male, you tend to hear conversations you don't. You're like,
Mm.
can you have that somewhere else, right?
Well,
And
no, you should be right there in the middle
yeah,
and listening and
yeah,
hearing what they are saying
yeah.
because you will learn a lot.
Yes, I did learn a lot. I learned that they would if there was a competition in 2 months, they would plan their birth control so they weren't on their period while
Mhm.
yeah.
competing and
Yep.
completely. I mean, they were pros. They
Mhm.
were so good at it about where
Absolutely.
they're getting it, what they were doing it, what they're and you know and when you've worked around females, they could do it too because there's a comedian that just came out and talked about that he didn't know that females all had Bluetooth because the more they spent time, their periods would sync up. They would pair, right? He goes, all women have Bluetooth because the
Mm.
cycle would pairing
Okay.
device. It was pairing device. So
Yeah.
they all were together so often they were on the same cycle. So they talked about it, and it's good to hear that conversation is happening because a big conversation that's very close to me is because I am older and now the athletes I worked with are a lot of them have retired,
Mhm.
is the mental health around life after sports when you're done.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I talk to so many kids, and in the conversations I have, we have a professional baseball player who got played millions to not go to high school, and he got drafted. And we talk all the time. I never
Mhm.
talk to him about baseball. I always talk about other things outside of baseball because I'm setting him up for when baseball is over. But I
Absolutely.
hope you have an identity when that's done, man,
Mhm.
because there are people that addiction hits them, depression hits them when their body just can't do it anymore. And the organization they thought loved them replaced them with somebody that's 21.
Mhm.
And I'm so glad that the conversations you're having are conversations about, hey, I know right now you're an athlete in college or a young athlete, and this is all you think about.
Mhm.
It's going to be over one day, and what do you have left?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yep.
I'm very close to that because I've had guys come to me in tears and saying, I think I'm done. And I'm like, now what? And they're like, I have no clue.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know what I'm doing because I don't know anything else other than this.
Mhm.
And then it makes you feel like, well, maybe I failed. Like, maybe all I did was talk to you about your sport, right? Maybe all I did was talk to you about if you're getting bigger, faster, stronger, and where your next contract's coming from. And I never was like, hey, buddy, like, how's home life? Like, are you okay? Like,
Mhm.
like, what are you doing? Thank you very much. I want to be
Yeah.
very respectful of your time because you seem very busy. Um, I was very excited when I started doing more research on you and finding out who you were. That I was like, oh, she's an exercise physiologist. Like I can have this conversation.
Yeah.
I can have this conversation, right? It's not,
Mm.
it's just like exercise and nutrition and fitness. That seems to be where your passion was, and just
Mm.
you guided it into this area. Um, I love this conversation. Uh, there's so much foresight in this conversation of looking forward, and I hope
Mhm.
girls watch this and hear you and be like, okay, well, maybe I need to start doing things. I also want it to be women that are pregnant now and
Mm.
addressing the mental health and what
Right.
you can and can't do because I've had women say things to me of like, "Oh, I'm pregnant, so I got to change everything." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know if that's true, but I don't know.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know how to answer that."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. So, as we finish, is there any kind of new research coming in this that you're excited about? Is there anything that you're like, we've never touched
Probably
on
so
that?
much.
Yeah, we've never touched on that, and we've never touched on it. One of our big ones that we talked about is uh we had somebody on here that we talked about the transition of male female genetics to the child through birth and how much the health of the parent, even preconception,
Mm,
the health of the parent preconception addressed the genetics and the sickness or the likelihood of being sickness and the health
mhm,
of the child. That was something that blew my mind
mhm,
when we talked
Mhm.
about, because that's a subject where I always say the dudes think they're scot-free. Like, the dudes are like, me and my wife party one night, she got pregnant, I'm out. Like, I did everything I need to do, right? And they think everything that happens with a child is 100% dependent on the placenta, and the placenta's in the mom. So for me to have a healthy baby, my wife better do her life right for the next 9 months,
mm.
right? And we found that's not really true.
No.
But is there anything that you're doing now or you look forward to doing in this area that you're really excited about that you think can make the most impact?
Um, I'm excited by pretty much everything I do, to be
Yeah.
honest.
It's very
It's
interesting.
yeah, I mean it's a fun area. There's lots of gaps. Something that should be coming out quite soon is we've developed new frameworks to help support women who don't really have any support to make decisions about, when do they need to see their physician, when do they need to be screened and treated for different conditions, and providing sort of guidance in terms of when you need to modify and when, frankly, you really don't need to. So we hear a lot in pregnancy that, well, you're trimester 1, so you should do this. Trimester 2, it's time to do this. And as soon as you magically go from, 27 to 28 weeks, well, you can do nothing, right? And so it's not as simple as that. And so trying to refine and provide a bit more evidence to be able to support pregnant but also postpartum women to make these decisions, whether it's on their own or with the support of fitness professionals and their healthcare providers, just to make things a little bit easier, reduce fear, reduce anxiety, and support choice about what they do in pregnancy and postpartum, because it's completely fair for somebody to decide, well, I'm pregnant, I just want to do yoga and I don't want to do CrossFit anymore. But it's equally appropriate for somebody to say, well, you know what? I love CrossFit. That is what I want to do to support my physical and my mental health. And so let's find a way to help make both happen.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Well, I've heard people say things like, well, I can't do this first trimester. And I just
Mm,
go, oh, okay.
yeah.
Like,
That's that was
I
my
never
whole point
question it.
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, when somebody asks me, like, they're just, like, unaware, and I just say, "I want you to feel comfortable. You can work out. There are limitations that you might experience, but I want you to leave here feeling good." Like,
Hmm.
that's the
Hmm.
extent of it, because everybody's gonna have a different bandwidth
Yeah.
for what they can handle.
Absolutely. And so when you talk about first trimester, again, sorry, I know we need to go, but
No,
you just stopped.
you're good. No, keep going.
Yeah. So when we talk about first trimester, we now have data which suggests that there's no increased risk of miscarriage. The main caveat to that one is, again, that fueling idea. So if you're not fueling yourself and you're, having spotty or irregular periods, you're probably not fueling yourself to sustain a pregnancy as well. So really focusing on what you're eating is essential in addition to the exercise. And then the second thing, I just got news this morning that our study looking at high load resistance training in the first trimester is going to come out in probably the next 2 or 3 weeks.
That's
So
exciting.
we
That's
finally have
exciting.
data based on that, which is
Mhm.
amazing. Mm,
That's
Perfect.
exciting. Well, that says a lot too about what this tells me too is how much farther we've come in
mm.
women's resistance training in
Oh
general,
my gosh.
right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, you know, me and Gray talk about this all the time. We work with a lot of women who are like, I would say early 40s, going into perimenopause, struggling with, inflammation and struggling with, insulin resistance, and have been over dieters. They're over caffeinated. They're
Mm,
underfed. But Gray made a really good point. She's like, they're they're dealing.
It's still
Right.
early there.
Yeah. They're dealing with. We're dealing with the population of women when they were girls who did jazzercise and cardio and took dextrose with their mom
Mm,
and did every single diet in the book from in their early teens to 20s, that now they're like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Right.
mhm.
So we're 30 years. I mean, you think about it, 80s, 90s weightlifting. I mean, when you think about it, we're really only 50 years from women being involved in active sports.
Mm,
What do you think about it?
mhm.
Let alone maybe 30 years that strength training was even important. And we're 30 years from, like, if a woman had any sort of muscle, she looked like a dude.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So now that think about how far we've gone from that to heavy load in the first trimester lifting. Pretty remarkable, right? Like
Mhm.
pretty incredible, right?
Mhm.
So thank you very much. I will say this, and I'm sure you're modest. I do think it's women like you who push the boundaries in what we're doing research on that make that happen, because not to bash dudes, but it feels like 15 dudes in there trying to make this decision. I'm sure we wouldn't have this research together. I'm positive we wouldn't have this research together, right? We wouldn't have this if it was 15 dudes. Like, the last thing I want to do is put 15 dudes in a room to talk about,
Pregnancy.
pregnancy, because no clue, bro. Listen,
Yeah.
I was in the room when that thing went down. It's a traumatic phased out. I don't even think about it anymore.
Mhm.
This type of situation. I was in a room just like eyes open, white knuckling. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on right now. And they're like, hey, you're a dad. I'm like, oh, I'm just about to pass out. But thank you very much for coming on.
Mhm.
We will share this info. I think this was awesome to have, because honestly, when women ask me this, I'm just going to take this podcast. It's going to be on Spotify, and I'm going to just send it to them. They're like, what should I
Mhm.
do during pregnancy? I'll just watch this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking your time and coming on. We appreciate it.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you.